So the new sci-fi movie Mute just came out on Netflix last night, and the combination of it being released straight to Netflix and then it having politics that a lot of critics don't agree with, it's whipped the critics up into a frenzy I haven't seen since Bright, or I guess Cloverfield Paradox, but I could understand really hating Cloverfield Paradox and saying it has no redeeming values, but the people who wrote in their reviews that this is one of the worst movies of the year, one of the worst movies they've seen, no redeeming qualities at all, there's no justification for that, because just looking at the visuals, which is a huge part of movies, just looking at the visuals, this is visually one of the best movies, at least of this year, but even if you look at 2017, this is visually one of the most engaging, creative movies that I've seen. And all these critics, they either ignore the tremendous amount of effort that went into these backdrops and these sets, or they say, well, it's beautiful, but it's just a carbon copy of Blade Runner, shamelessly ripping off Blade Runner. Are they saying that anytime you have neon, and you have advertisement-saturated backdrops, and you have robots and flying vehicles, anytime you have any of those elements, well, you're just ripping off Blade Runner. Because while this movie did have elements that it shared with Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, it had so many elements that Blade Runner didn't have. One, the Berlin Cold War vibe reminded me a lot of Atomic Blonde, just this grunge and graffiti. There was a guy with a Joseph Stalin t-shirt. It was a very funny touch. You had food delivery where you order food at these giant touch screens on the street, and you have to enter your phone number, enable location tracking on your phone, and then drones fly you the food. It's very cool. You had futuristic apartment complexes where the doors, they look like cell phone lock screens. I really like that as well. I saw that in the new season of Black Mirror. And to go along with this technology, so many different costumes, so much effort into the costume design. A lot of it reminded you of glam rock, and since David Bowie's son is actually the director, you've got to wonder how much of that was what influenced him with all of these off-the-wall flamboyant costumes. And I could go on, but just looking at this film visually, I would say it's on par with Blade Runner. Blade Runner had a better look and feel, kind of a more distinct look and feel, particularly Blade Runner 2049, but there was just more going on in this, more to look at, more effort put in, more different diversity in sets, all these different elements and things going on. So I've got to appreciate just the effort they put into making this a visually engaging film that I would watch again, because there's just so much going on. You're never bored. There's so many things to look at. And also the score, the music is really good. It's understated. Oftentimes you don't realize just how much the music is helping complement these visuals, but I did want to point out the score. So visually it's beautiful, and this is a great example of, you think of conceptual sci-fi that's exploring these ideas and making you think, thought-provoking, versus like environmental sci-fi where you just see these futuristic images and technology. So I think this is a great example of an environmental sci-fi. As far as conceptually making you think, it doesn't do as good a job, but there are still a lot of themes to explore. If you look at his sketches and his drawings and the amount of detail and effort and focus and patience that goes into that, similar to his woodworking, and then you get to his Amish background, obviously that's a big part of the culture, and it's this critique of short attention span, ADD, tech-heavy culture, that I thought it was interesting how they paired those elements together. And I thought the being a mute thing was interesting as well, because just as he's not able to speak the same sounds, he's not really able to speak the same language. He's not able to speak this language of profit and exploitation and sex. He's from the simpler, in some ways better time of traditional values, monogamy. So I did find that some people criticize the mute aspect as a gimmick, and they said they never addressed it. I think it was really used well. And I thought Skarsgård, the lead, he actually gave a great performance, just this old school physical presence, and the action, there wasn't a lot of action, but when there was action, it was great. I'm thinking of one scene in particular with the aforementioned wood carvings. I thought it was excellent. And the actual mystery itself, some people are saying this is a hard-boiled noir mystery. I don't think the mystery was particularly good. The detective work was particularly interesting, but I think the characterization was actually really strong, which led for some great showdowns towards the end. And now I'll get into, I guess, the most controversial aspect of this film. A lot of people are saying that if not outright condoning pedophilia, at least it's making light of it. They use words like glib and flippant. They're not treating it with the seriousness that it deserves. And to talk about this, I do have to engage in mild spoilers, so spoiler warning. Last thing I'll say before spoilers, another really fun little touch is this is set somewhere in the near future, and the Afghanistan war is still going on, the longest running US war, so I thought that was interesting. But moving into spoilers, at first, I understand it seems like Paul Rudd's character and his friend, they seem very comedic, and there's banter back and forth between them. So when the pedophile aspect is introduced, it does seem like it's being introduced in this comedic context. But if you watch the whole movie, which I think a lot of critics just haven't, the pedophile aspect, it's not this throwaway line, it's not this aside. No, it's the central defining characteristic of this horrible, hideous villain. And towards the end of the movie, we see this really come into play in really dark ways. And at first, we have what I thought was a really powerful scene of Paul Rudd confronting his friend, beating him, screaming at him. And it was a good response to him finding out about maybe what his friend's predilections are, but I thought it was ultimately an insufficient response. The fact that he continued to be his friend in some way tacitly condoned this, and the movie makes it clear or implies that this condoning was what led to his downfall, because his friend eventually betrays him and leaves him choking on the ground. So it was great to see this interaction, a realistic interaction with what do you do when this person you know, you joke with, who makes these kind of weird jokes, these kind of jokes that you're not really sure if they're serious, and then you find out that maybe this is a serious thing, and you do have a response that's, again, like I say, a powerful response, but ultimately insufficient. How in the end, if you let this person hang around, they're going to betray you and potentially really harm the people you love. And at the end, you get this great, powerful scene. I mean, you're talking Dirty Harry singing, what do they sing? Row, row, row your boat. Like, that's just how tense the tension builds towards the end, and you get this great showdown with the villain at the end. So I can't fault this storyline at all. I thought it was great, and one of the, again, everyone's saying it's just a subplot, it was just thrown in there. No, it's like, it's central to the story. And also, I thought Paul Rudd gave a great performance. I love seeing him in this role. When he pulled the knife, this big buck knife, out on this mall cop, it was a great moment, and I've never seen him do this, but I thought he blended so well what we know Paul Rudd, this kind of goofy, comedic, lovable charm, with actually being a menacing, horrible villain, and he combined these things really well. I think of someone like Vince Vaughn. I've seen Vince Vaughn be really funny. I've seen Vince Vaughn be very imposing and hulking. I've never seen him combine these two things well. So I thought what Paul Rudd was able to do was actually quite interesting. He played a villain, but a distinctly Paul Rudd villain. So I'm going to end the video there because it's getting long. Bottom line, don't believe the critics on this one at all. Is this a perfect movie? Is it one of the best of the year? No. Is this a 1 out of 5 or a 0 out of 5? Of course not. There's so much going for it. Definitely worth a stream. If you like sci-fi, again, it's not the most conceptually heavy sci-fi, but as far as having a lot of cool different visuals, doing a lot of great world building, I think it's a great movie. Definitely check it out.